My name is Sylvia Parris-Drummond. I'm the CEO for the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute. The Viola Desmond Community Talks series carries on Viola's legacy of entrepreneurship, education, and social action, inspiring the leaders in all of us.
The pardon is the core of everything that came after. I was really surprised when I sit here and I'm talking to you, and I feel it over that. After that pardon, the tears are welling in my eyes. After that pardon, all these accolades came, and I'm surrounded by them. And I wish my mom was here, my dad, but anyway, and Viola herself. But it's amazing. I'm talking to you, and I can feel the welling up of amazement, if that can be said, because there's so many things have come along with this pardon, with Viola and her story.
Welcome to the Viola Desmond Community Talks series, celebrating the journey. This is the final episode of our docu-series. We wanted to reflect and look forward. The Viola Desmond Community Talks docu-series has been a gift of learning and sharing. The Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute is pleased to have been able to bring the full story of Viola to life and to have it broadly accessible via our YouTube platform, our community partner, the Cultural Center, and our industry partner, Eastlink Community TV. A heartfelt thank you to everyone who was part of the journey from idea to execution, including the DBDLI staff team members, the docu-series planning committee, those who participated in the previous episodes, and of course, everyone here today. Your Honor, Dr. Mayann Francis, I recall our brainstorm conversations and your encouragement to move forward with this hosting idea and your sage advice to ensure that this series tells the full story of Viola. Welcome. Thank you. Mr. Percy Paris, in your position as Minister for the Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs, you were leading from the inside during the time of work to secure the free pardon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Kristin Williams, during your PhD studies, you discovered and were deeply moved by Viola. It was wonderful to learn of that during our series and to see allyship in action as you advocated for the businesswoman, Viola, to be honored. Welcome. Thank you. Dr. Késa Munroe-Anderson, I recall you wholeheartedly answering the call to serve as the interviewer for all three of the docuseries. Each conversation you led provided a comfort space for the story of Viola and her impact to unfold. Your research-informed questions and gentle probing conversations ensured a rich story-sharing experience. Welcome.
Thank you, Sylvia.
I'm looking forward to your individual sharing and the energy that exudes when passions and stories are exchanged in a sharing space. I am pleased that we will also be able to engage with Senator Dr. Wanda Thomas-Bernard through the magic of technology. It will be exciting to learn more about Viola's influence on their personal and professional lives and the impact today from each of their perspectives. It was important and appropriate that Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute lead the project sharing Viola's story because of two people. Delmore Buddy Day, our organization's namesake, and Wanda Robson, Viola's baby sister. Mr. Day was a leader grounded in our community thanks to his single voice activism and response to the bigger picture issues. He celebrated entrepreneurs and was vocal about the importance of education. Our aspirational vision here at the Institute is to create educational change for learners and communities of African ancestry across the province. Our Viola Desmond Community Talks series is an important contribution to reaching that vision. In the spirit of deep respect for family and elder wisdom, we would not have gone forward with this series without the green light from Wanda Robson. I am so appreciative of her sharing her memories of Viola and providing details to help shape the episodes. I'm especially grateful to Wanda's ongoing recognition and promotion of the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute. She is forever a rock star.
I said to myself, what better way to get information out about Viola or anything that concerns the Black culture of Nova Scotia than going to the Buddy Day Learning Institute. I knew Buddy very personally, by the way. My brother and he were good friends, and and I admired him very much so. When you asked me about Viola, I say yes, she was wonderful. She did a great deal of service for our people. She stood up for when injustice was there. But just think, there are many people like her that have not been recognized or are recognized. But and so I think it's a collaboration of our success as Blacks. It's a collaboration of all things that have happened and the results of these things that happen to people who are advocates, people who are like Viola, like Carrie Best, So um, it's an honor, really, and that was my sister, yes. But it's an honor to be able to talk about her, and I started talking about her when I was in university. Now, what you see, what took me so long? I asked myself, what took me so long? Not, I mean, not to well, I recognized what she had done, but you know what? When that incident happened, Viola, I was 19. I was an idiot. I was 19. I didn't know the value. I was embarrassed. Yeah, I hung my head. I went to work next day. Oh, was that your sister? Yes. I hung my head. That's your sister? Yes. I I applauded inwardly what she had done, but I was ashamed because she had been in jail. The word jail. I said, "Oh, jail." She was in jail, not realizing the ramifications of what had the whole scene of what had happened to her. But I put that aside, married, had children. Every now and then I thought of Viola as my sister, fun times and funny times. And it didn't dawn on me. All those years went by. Of course, I was busy. You get married, have children, and children take up all your time. I didn't really learn about what what really happened in that incident to Viola. I didn't the whole core of it. I didn't understand. Maybe I didn't learn. I don't know, but it didn't dawn on me the full reaction, the full actions of what she had done until I was studying. See, there's that learning process again. I was sitting in class in the university. I was 73 or 4 or some ridiculous age. And all of a sudden, this he says, well, here's her. here's a series of people that I'd like to introduce you on the screen. And there was Viola there. I said, what's she doing there? But that was the beginning of everything, of learning, learning. That's the word. And I thank the university for bringing this out. And as I talk to children, as I talk more, I realized, I fully realized what she had done. I realized before, but everything it all flashed to me jail. But when I came down off my little whatever it was and unfully understood, I am so proud of that little woman.
Our conversations today will be a chance to hear the various perspectives of the impact of Viola, an individual who modeled the importance of agency, voice, and responding to the call for the leader that lives within us. To my guests, the series has concluded, and each of you have taken something personal from Viola. Now that we have shared Viola's full story, how do you feel and how were you impacted? Your Honor, may I invite you to start us off?
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I really appreciate the opportunity for us to be here today and to talk about Viola Desmond. And I want to thank the Delmore Buddy Day Institute for the series on Viola Desmond. Very, very important, and sincere thank you to that. So in terms of your question about Viola's impact on myself, I would have to say that April the 15th, 2010, when I granted Viola Desmond the Royal Prerogative of Mercy-Free Pardon, I had said at that time that granting her the free pardon, that she will be talked about for many, many, many years, and I even say generations. Mm-hmm. And so here we are in 2021, and we are talking about Viola. You hear talk about Viola, about history, in social work, in political science, in the media. And it's so important to talk about her because her influence way back when, over 75 years ago, is still impacting today. So the impact she's had on me is for my feeling so related to her, not related in the sense of family and things like that, but the fact that my name and her name were connected because I've given her the freedom. And to have the first Black lieutenant governor in Nova Scotia grant freedom to a Black woman, that is very meaningful to me, and it's just something that continues to impact me. And also, I never did know until after her freedom was granted that she's buried next door to me where I live. Mm-hmm. And so that adds another thing. So every time somebody talks about her or asks me questions about her, I do visit her grave and have a little chat with her. I make sure nobody's watching me because they're wondering, oh, who is she talking to, right? But it's just that Viola has had such an impact on, I think, everybody, including myself, because you keep learning about her, and then you keep analyzing what you're hearing and what you're learning. So her impact on me will always be positive. And I always say to her when I visit her gravesite, I said, here I am again, and I say, we're connected, and we are. So yeah. She's had an impact on me, which is positive. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate the expanding out, if you will, from that seminal year in terms of the free pardon at the time. And I know, Percy, you were involved at that time, as we acknowledged earlier, kind of leading from within. And maybe in terms of responding to the question, you want to make that connection and add some other pieces about the impact for you.
Well, it was a huge impact for me. When we talk about Viola Desmond, it's a story I don't think that resonated with a lot of Canadians. And I think there were Nova Scotians, particularly in the African Nova Scotian community, that knew the story, but it wasn't one that was being championed anywhere. And the story needed a champion, and we were very fortunate at that time that we had a government in place that was receptive, and certainly an LG that was willing and able to sign off on the free pardon. When we talked about the free pardon for Viola Desmond, I think the biggest part of the story, which is untold, was convincing the family that this was a good thing, and that took a lot of conversation, and rightly so, because there was at the time there was the talk around the table was an admission of guilt, which wasn't the purpose of a free pardon. So it took many conversations with Mrs. Robinson, and finally she was willing to put her trust in me, in the system, and let this story be told. And I think as a result of that free pardon is that the exposure that Viola Desmond and the story got was just simply enormous, and I think it kick-started a whole movement, not only here in Nova Scotia, but right across the entire country of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of focus in terms of the free pardon and the languaging around that. Wanda in Sisters of Courage, she writes about that, and she actually kind of muses out how kind of entertaining it was for her, because it always opened up a conversation for her to talk more deeply about Viola when people didn't fully express, Your Honor, which is, maybe you could add into it, like what is that full titling in terms of the pardon that she received.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that's a key piece about pardoning her, because the royal prerogative of mercy, free pardon, can only be granted by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, obviously, or her representative, and it's only granted to people who are innocent. Okay, so this is why I'm so happy that we keep talking about her, because some people say, oh well, she was guilty. No, she was not guilty. Mm-hmm. Having a free pardon is totally different from somebody who is guilty and is pardoned by government, not Lieutenant Governor or Governor General on behalf of Her Majesty. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it is true that she was innocent. She was not guilty. And so it took all that time from 1946 to 2010 to give her that free pardon for something that she did not do. She was innocent. Yeah, so that's important.
Really great education opportunity here now. Thank you to you both for sharing that. And Kristin, I know that it was actually a connecting conversation with Her Honor that also introduced you to Viola. So would you like to say a little more about that for us?
Well, thank you very much. And it's such an honor to be here and to be part of this panel and wonderful group of people in our shared admiration for Viola and what she's accomplished. And I've had some extraordinary mentors on my journey, and Her Honor was and continues to be one, as does Ms. Robson and Viola herself. Mm-hmm. I started my journey in wanting to get to know Viola because I saw her portrait, and I thought, who is this amazing person, and what can I get to know about her? And I quickly started to understand her role in civil rights, and I understood what had happened with the pardon. But what I was fixated on was why we were not understanding and appreciating her business identity as this tenacious and extraordinary female entrepreneur operating in a time of segregation in Nova Scotia. And I felt that that's the story that needed to be told. And I started very tentatively because, as you can appreciate, I was worried about being a white woman stepping in to help tell the story of a black woman. And I wasn't sure if there would be a place for me to do that. And I'm happy to say that I was encouraged at every opportunity to apply my privilege and apply my skills and talent to do that. And over the course of several years, I was ultimately able to help with Her Honor and Rustham Southwell to get her considered for induction in the Nova Scotia Business Hall of Fame. So she finally will be recognized for her business accomplishments on a public stage. And she's the 100th laureate to be inducted. So it's for me, it's been a complex journey, one that has developed me as an advocate, one that has allowed me to explore my writing and my storytelling, and one in which I made relationships with people that I will have for life. And I'm so grateful for that.
Thanks. Dr. Késa, so I know you probably smiled, I wasn't directly looking at you, but you probably smiled when I said how graciously you stepped up, and which was very true. But what I would like folks to know as well is how honored we were to have you do that. You know, busy times in everyone's lives for sure, and knowing that you were going to help us shape up what this full story was. And so there was a piece that was in that you carried for us most generously. And so I want to acknowledge that as I invite you to talk more about that aspect of impact for you, you know, in the beginning, through the series, however you'd like to kind of share that through.
Certainly, Sylvia. I feel blessed, I feel honored, I feel energized, and I feel encouraged and inspired after having journeyed with all of us here today, and those who are not able to make it here with us today, concerning learning about Viola Desmond, and also sharing knowledge and drawing out knowledge and researching about Viola Desmond's stories, her courage, and her talent, her intelligence, her community contributions, which are vast and many. And I feel that this opportunity has given me pause to even reflect on myself as a Black woman, as a woman of African descent, African Nova Scotian woman living here in Nova Scotia, reflecting on Viola's courage, reflecting on her strength and tenacity, and all that she did as an entrepreneur as well, in terms of making space for women and for others. I feel that I've grown during this journey, and I feel that she has strengthened and encouraged me and given me courage, and I feel that her spirit is with me, journeying with me as well. As I live in Nova Scotia, I encounter some of the aspects of anti-Black racism that she also encountered.
It's part of the impact for me in the revisiting of Viola's story was helping me to truly, I think, more fully appreciate the significance of her legacy. And although, you know, on one level, you know it intellectually, but I felt it more on a spiritual level. And that was partly because of seeing other people articulate the significance that her journey had on them. That spiritual connection that she has with all of us really came through for me.
Oh, thank
More
you.
so than I'd ever experienced. And that's not something you can experience in reading about her life, or even watching, you know, the short video about her. Any of those pieces, it's really through hearing and witnessing other people speaking about the impact on their lives. I felt that very strong connection.
Yeah, I really appreciate the theme connection that I hear around that impact, that it is personal, talked about having conversations, thinking that through in terms of making choices about like kind of what you do, where you want to go, and then, you know, being really mindful about how would she be situated today in terms of how we would think. So we're going to go to break, and then maybe we can start to explore some more into the community, into that impact piece as youth, as individuals, as a Black communities, Nova Scotian communities as a whole. So thank you. So we're going to go to break now, and we'll see you after to hear more about Viola's full story. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with our panelists about Viola's impact and her full story on community and individuals. So, Késa, I'm going to come to you with this one for the start. So, if we consider her impact, and we've talked about that in individuals, so now if we could think a little more deeply about it in terms of community, what would you want to say in terms of how she's impacted Black African Nova Scotian communities?
I believe that Viola Desmond is and was then a symbol of Afrocentricity even before anybody dreamt of that term, because she was all about centering people of African descent in education through her school, in the products that she produced, the cosmetics, the wigs that she produced, and in general, as a person, as a community leader. She was focused on making a space for people of African descent, and specifically, the school was focused on women of African descent, Black women, providing a space, filling that gap for women. And I also say, there's this slogan, for us, by us. Long before anybody thought of the for us, by us, Viola Desmond was doing it. She was living it. She was actioning what that meant. And today I feel that we can continue to look to Viola to teach us many lessons that we can draw on so that we can understand what it means to center people of African descent in every aspect of our lives, whether that's education, business, the world of business, community work, you name it, justice. I feel that we, as people of African descent, African Nova Scotians, we have so much to be grateful for in Viola's story. We can look to her life, we can look to her courage, we can look to her creativity, her ingenuity, to again fill those gaps where the cosmetics weren't available, the wigs weren't available. She made them herself. And not only did she make them herself, but she taught others to make them. She taught others, so she's passing this knowledge on to help others to have fruitful and productive lives, to make their own way in life as businesswomen as well. And I believe there's a lot to be said to that. We will be speaking about her, as has already been said. Her legacy will continue to grow and develop for many years to come. And I'm sure there are many aspects of her story that we haven't even touched on yet that we'll get to in the years to come.
Yes, thank you. And it's good to think about that in the aspect of kind of evolving, aspects. And Percy, you had mentioned the idea about talking about it from your perspective in terms of the engagement from a sense of pride. Do you see that as something extending into the Black community as well?
Absolutely, and I think in more ways than one. And with Viola Desmond, and it's already been mentioned, she had so much to offer, not only to the business community. She was, in my words, an excellent role model, but in so many ways: education, justice, business. She was a devoted entrepreneur, and she created a market for herself. She wasn't looking for mainstream Nova Scotia to make all her dollars. And one of the things that Viola Desmond did that too often those individuals that are non-Black do for the community, Viola Desmond did with the community. A huge difference, doing with as opposed to doing for. So as a role model, she did this because this was all natural to her. I didn't think she would sit at home and say, well, I'm going to be a role model for the community and this is what I'm going to do. She was one of those, a hero through evolution was there. And it's something that we all, and I say all, I mean all Nova Scotians can be proud of. And the more we hear and learn about Viola Desmond, the image just gets larger and larger and larger, and that's a sign of a true hero.
Yeah, I really appreciate you using that word "with." We understand that so deeply within our community, right? How that engagement is. Your Honor, I don't know what that kind of raises up for you hearing the conversations to date, and particularly again about what I hear as a respect for the community, an appreciation of listening to what the community needs were and responding to them. So,
what was just said about Viola is so true. So I ditto everything that you both said about her because it is true. And with Viola, I just truly love her emphasis on education. Okay, and that's one of the impacts I see on us too. Today in 2021, because remember, she studied to be a school teacher. And then she was influenced by reading about other people, especially the millionaire United States in the cosmetic industry, that she said, maybe I can do this too, and she did, and here she is, right? So the education aspect is so important for all of us in terms of moving forward in this world, whether it's education to get a doctorate degree, a master's degree, an MA degree, or BA degree, or if you decide you want to work in a technical industry, that's fine too, but get the education for it, which is very important. The other part too about the impact on what they've said about Viola is her commitment to her family. That was very, very positive, her commitment to her family. And Viola also demonstrated love, understanding, and with her impact, the impact that the racism had on her, she brought attention to segregation. That clearly brought attention to segregation and started closing things off that were segregated only for Black people to be in. But Viola, to this day, 2021, is still influencing all of us. We're still dealing with racism and systemic discrimination. There's no question about that. And I can't help but wonder if Viola was still here, what would her thoughts be? Because she fought for justice, okay? She fought for justice because she sat in the movie theater in a spot where she could not. She sat there because for poor eyesight. It was her poor eyesight to sit close, right? And then she was abused and dragged out, thrown in jail, spent the night in jail and so forth. But her fight for justice was fighting in democracy, knowing that we all have a right. If you want to sit, close to the screen, we should have that right, and it shouldn't be because of the color of your skin you can't sit there, or your gender, or whatever. So she clearly opened the door for further discussion on racism and discrimination, and we're still having discussions today because it's still alive and well.
A Black woman driving, owning her own car, driving across the province on her own. I mean, she was a feminist before we knew what feminism was. And she was an African-centered feminist. She was doing this work. It wasn't just about her building up her acumen as a businesswoman. It was really about what she was giving to the community. Essentially, she was lifting all of us up as she was doing her work, doing her business, challenging, breaking through the barriers, challenging assumptions. She was elevating all of us without even knowing that.
Yeah, and in the aspect of just stepping into action, right? I think, as well is something that I hear in her story as an individual, and so there's different ways to be activists, right? And I think we can, see that lens for Viola as well. And education, lifelong learning, it's for adults, it's for seniors, it's for everyone. I just want to shape a little bit of our conversation in terms of thinking about it in terms of the lens of talking about youth. And Kristin, I want to invite you to say some comments for us in terms of that. I know you lead organizations that are engaged with youth and that look at some things in terms of mentoring, offering opportunities. So what do you think is the best way to inspire youth using Viola's legacy?
I think it's really interesting because I don't think we ever outgrow the need to have mentors. I certainly haven't yet. And when I look at Viola's story and the tremendous resiliency and self-belief that she had, the positive disposition she would have had to take on to educate herself, to go out of Nova Scotia, go into the States to acquire the training that she needed. This is someone who has just a powerful sense of her self-belief and is a self-advocate. And so what I think is really important for youth to understand is that they have to develop their own voice and they have to be able to communicate their needs and they have to find those willing around them to support them. And Viola's courage is, I think, a reminder to all of us to find that within ourselves. But her ability to self-advocate and then pass on that to other young women was an extraordinary part of her legacy, and quite frankly, I think it can't be understated. It's really one of the most remarkable things that she did.
Yeah, and we've heard about her time in teaching in the school system and herself, like just taking off and getting what she needed in terms of her training and her desire to express her voice, if you will, and to take her agency. And Dr. Késa, from your perspective, you have children in the public school system, I know. You're a lifelong learner yourself, so you have opportunities, I know as well, to be the instructor, the educator for folks who are young and folks who are going to be in the leadership role. What would you say in terms of Viola Desmond's legacy impact in terms of youth?
I am a lifelong learner, and I am a strong proponent for education. I believe that folks can take anything away from you. They might take a title that they've given you away from you, but they cannot take your education. They cannot take your education from you. And I believe that in all of our getting, we should be getting understanding and knowledge and wisdom and take hold of every opportunity that we have to learn. Now, I do, like Viola gained learning from community. She valued that learning from community. She traveled abroad, as Her Honor spoke about that, and learned from Madam C.J. Walker and others who mentored her. And then she reciprocated, which is very important, going back to what Mr. Paris has said, that reciprocated dedication to community and passing on that knowledge. And I believe that we need to teach our children that it's important to learn from the formal education methods and approaches. It's important to learn from our elders as well in our community, and it's also important to reciprocate what we have learned, to give back to our community. There's another piece that I think is very important from Viola's example, and that is self-determination. Viola determined in her heart and in her spirit to do what she wanted to do, what she intended to do, which was to make a difference and to establish a business, a successful one, and she did, to establish a school, a successful one, which she did, and women traveled from all across Canada to attend this school. She determined, she purposed in her heart what was needed, and then she determined, I'm going to do that. I'm going to achieve that. And I don't think there's anything that can quench that fire of self-determination when we nurture that within ourselves. And I would say to adults that we must nurture that fire of self-determination rather than quench it in our youth. I try to do that with every opportunity with my own children and other youth that I come into contact with. And also when I have the opportunity to teach teachers or teach people who will be teachers as well on that importance of creating the environment for people to be and to attain their full purpose in life. That is absolutely critical, and Viola taught us that. Self-determination is very important.
Thank you, thank you. And so, as you said, the learning can happen in a variety of spaces. And I think possibly we want to think too about asking that folks learn Viola's full story. So, Percy, I would invite you to talk about what you think should be in place so that there can be easy access to the learning of Viola's story broadly.
Yeah, I would think a prerequisite for me is the public education system here in Nova Scotia. This isn't easy to do, and I think at various levels through public education, individuals should be learning about the Viola Desmond story and all the aspects of Viola Desmond, because it's not a one-off story. There's multiple stories within Viola Desmond, and what we've done. And when you think of the years that have gone, 75 years, we are still learning from Viola Desmond's story. And one of the things that happens in our public school system, and I think happens in life itself, is that we create this position in our lives about an awareness of what it is. We became aware of Viola Desmond. It takes a while for us to move from that awareness stage to the understanding of the Viola Desmond story. And that's with respect to a lot of things in life. So Viola Desmond is still relevant. We talk about, in her honor is mentioned about the racism that exists today in our own society. That's what makes this story, Viola Desmond, so important to all of us and would be such an integral part of the public education system, creating that awareness, that understanding, so that those individuals in that public school system who are the people of tomorrow can follow through with an action that means something, an action that's going to be the right action. And too often what happens in our society, and this happens with governments, and we create an action because we've been made aware of something. We create an action, and the action too often is wrong. It's flawed because we don't have the understanding. Viola Desmond's story provides us with a better understanding around racism, the ills in our society, the ills that plague not only individuals that are of African descent, but also women. And we can also apply that to children as well, to young learners. I shouldn't say children, young learners. It's a learning process. And again, fill the gap. Awareness, understanding, bang, action.
Thank you for that awareness and understanding and knowledge is so important. I mean, for the most part, for people that came into speaking about Viola, they came in through the justice part of it, the free pardon, and that opened it up. And so there was this opportunity to kind of come in and to learn more. And you've shared that in the conversations today. It's been shared in the previous episodes as we keep using the word, the fuller story. But we're wondering if there's more that was learned in that airing of those episodes and in your thinking about it. And so when we come back from break, we're going to hear our panelists talk more about what they may have learned themselves as part of being participatory in the docuseries. And we're also going to start to talk about, I think we might call it an aspect of so what? What will we go for in terms of now of some of the things that might be looked at in a more deliberate planning way. So we're going to take a break and we'll come back and have more discussion. Welcome back. Your Honor, I think with your deep knowledge and engagement with Viola, this next question may be a challenge for you to answer. What was something you learned about Viola Desmond that you didn't know before the series?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. But before I get into the challenge of that, I just want to comment on what Percy said about young people and the influence of Viola Desmond. 2 days ago, I was talking to a Black woman who's working on her master's in business administration, and she said, I was influenced to do business as a result of Viola Desmond. And she's considering doing her PhD in business as well, and looking at some kind of theories that she wants to connect with Black women in business and Viola Desmond. So that's amazing. So there you go. So the influence is there. So the question about did I learn anything about Viola that I didn't know? And I have to say that after the government was briefing me on Viola Desmond, because I didn't learn about Viola Desmond in school. That just was not there. So in terms of the briefing and in doing my own information about Viola, as well as my friend, the late Beverly Maskell, who told me about that, because she was influenced by Viola and had a successful business career herself, and unfortunately she passed away a little too young. But in any event, when I found out that Viola's mom was abused, not physically, by lawyers for a position that she had them work in. Anyway, they stole her money, okay? And because her mom was so busy, because the mother was clearly involved in a lot of community work as well. So the mom was so busy, and then Viola found out about it and said, well, we have to do something about this. So Viola did her own reading and education and went to visit the law firm and made the argument that what happened to her mom. And from what I understand, and this came from her sister, that they said, well, where did you go to law school? And she said, I didn't go to law school, I've been reading. And she pointed to books. They gave her the money that was supposed to have gone to her mom. So that's another example of a woman, Viola Desmond, whose love for her parent understands when there's things that are wrong, she's going to make an argument for the positive aspect of it, or doing the right things, right? So she was an honest person. She was somebody who demonstrated honesty. She's somebody who demonstrated love for family. She's somebody who demonstrated love for community, and courage. And it was mentioned earlier about her having the courage and everything. But that aspect I did not know about. But that's amazing, because it showed that her courage, to go into an all-white law firm. At that time, there wasn't any Black lawyer, and made her case, and they listened to her. So there you go. But she was going to sue them.
She read the right books.
She did. So that I did not know about, but knowing about that now adds another piece in my head about Viola.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Dr. Késa, I'm going to invite you in this kind of part right now, and then I'm going to queue up Kristin and Percy. I'm going to come back to you. But just in terms of that, as someone again who, as I said, held up the role over 3 docuseries, For you two, is it difficult to think about something that was new for you learning from the series?
As I reflected on that question, I see a lot of myself in Viola, or a lot of Viola in me, I should say. You know, she was a black woman of short in stature and wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. I think I see a lot of those qualities in myself. And as I continue to reflect and dig in to Viola Desmond's story, you know, it's like this treasure chest, and it's endless. And I believe for the rest of my life, I will continue to learn more and more and access the treasures of Viola. But there's one thing that stood out for me particularly, and that is, I believe she needs to be named as an African Nova Scotian, African Canadian feminist. And I'm not certain if she's been precisely named as such. She's been named a lot of things, but I don't know if she's precisely been named as such. And I know, Kristin, that in your dissertation that you make those references, but we need to see her named in terms of the body of work on Canadian feminism. She needs to be named as an African Canadian, African Nova Scotian, Canadian, just Canadian feminist as well, because we need to understand that activist spaces, when we think about social activism, social justice, justice in general, historically and traditionally those spaces have been seen as male only and white only spaces. But here is Viola Desmond, a black woman, an African Nova Scotian woman who demonstrated social justice, who demonstrated the importance of standing up for what is right, as Her Honor mentioned. And then when we think about the intersections, the importance of her story, because oftentimes when we're talking about race, we speak about race and racism as if, you know, it covers everyone and everything of color. But specifically for Viola Desmond's story, it shines a spotlight on anti-Black racism, specifically in how it intersects with gender. Right. And when we look at her life and the fact that she died an early death, you know, I can't help but wonder, I wish there was a way we could find out how her life was impacted by the trauma she experienced, and how we don't tend to talk a lot about trauma, you know, in terms of the impact of racism, anti-Black racism, and on Black women specifically. And I believe for me that's just opened up a whole new arena of information I need to seek out and dig into, in terms of, it's speculation because she's not here to tell us. However, I believe that's something that we need to focus on, the impact of trauma on people of color in general, people of African descent, and African Nova Scotian, African Canadian women.
Yes, please.
I agree 100% with what you just said, because racism does have a negative impact on people. Some people are stronger and get through it, and some don't. So in this situation with Viola, we don't know, but it's clear that her business did not continue to go uphill. And I believe very strongly it was the impact of what racism did to her. And having a chat with her sister, she said Viola was tired. And you think about it, headlines, defrauded the government, what, you know what I'm saying? And then she continued her struggle for rights, and it didn't work. So it has to have impacted her in some way. And when we think about mental challenges, how many of even us today can get into the health system easily as a result of, because of our color, and we need the mental health and encouragement and to give us strength and everything. So what you said is so important, and it's so real, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's reality in 2021.
And you know, it raises up as well, your conversations raises up as well from the perspective of what's lost to Nova Scotia, right? Because she was not able to continue on in that way. I mean, we all recognize the amazing things that happened at that time in the late 1940s. You know, there she was, this independent woman driving across the province, and you know, as we all know, all of the other things that she's been able to do. So there is most definitely an accuracy in saying there is a loss in Nova Scotia because of what happened. And so, where do you see, Percy, Kristin, where do you see kind of any connection with that, with what we're talking about in terms of the space around for your study, Kristin, or your work with youth? Percy, for your engagement with community, your leadership in terms of understanding government structures. Percy, I'll invite you to jump in and go.
Thank you. Again, I found that a particularly interesting question, because I'll tell you a little story, and it will be brief. But when I was growing up in Nova Scotia, in my family, I knew about Viola Desmond, but I didn't learn it in school. But I knew about Viola Desmond because it was an oral story that was told to me and my siblings by our parents about this woman that was removed from a movie theater in New Glasgow, and we knew about her. But the learning has been since, I don't know, I would have been, because it happened before I was born, but it was still alive during my early years of life, my early years of education, but not in the public school system, but at home. And I often wondered if the story was fact or if it actually happened. And my parents would reiterate the story to us so many times, and they used it as an education tool. And they were educating us about racism in the province of Nova Scotia, and how we should address certain issues as we went through the public school system here. So what I've learned from Viola Desmond started at a very, very early age. It has continued. It's been a lifelong journey. It's been a lifelong journey because as I get older, and even with the presentations that have been made here, I keep learning more and more about Viola and how they can apply to everyday life for those of African descent. But also, I know how it can apply to all of society because it tells the story. And with that story, again, I repeat myself, it gives an understanding of what has taken place and what could be taking place in the future. So, what I've learned from Viola, her story, the learning continues. It's a lifelong journey for me, and every day, I shouldn't say every day, but continuously I'm learning something new about her schooling, her business strength, how she impacted community, how she knew how to run a business, where she got educated, how educated she was. But someone's already mentioned is the other side, because I think for those of us of African descent, we can relate to some of the stresses in life when it comes to racism. And I can speak factually from my own experience and my experience in politics. I was completely drained by that life, completely drained. It wasn't the politics per se, but it was the racism attachment that went with it. So I can only imagine what Viola Desmond went through at that period back in the 40s. Back in the 40s. And she probably didn't have these support mechanisms around her. At least I had family and friends. And so that would help one, and I'll use the word recover from some of the events in your life. And she wouldn't have been privy to maybe some of the same supports that her honor or I have had, or other individuals that are around now in this 2021. So I have great admiration for her courage and her courage of conviction, and for her to stand, and oftentimes standing alone.
Can I just say something? Because you know what's really great from what he just said about that? Because the lesson we could learn today is not to allow racism to stop you from moving forward in terms of doing something positive, and not to let it get to you to feel that you are inferior, because you're not. Because whatever the psychological effect it had on Viola, think of what she could have done to all of Canada and maybe internationally. Because she was a creative person and she was just very bright. So, but that was the negative impact of racism, and it can still have a negative impact today. But look at that as looking for support, as you mentioned, to move forward. So, just have to say.
That statement, lift as you climb, is one I borrow from Angela Davis. I've heard Bell Hooks use it as well. And I build on it and use the phrase lift as you lead. And one of the things I talk about is the leadership that we all have within us. If Viola was here today and we were interviewing her and we were asking her about her leadership skills, she would probably start by saying, well, I'm not a leader. Because most people tend to see leadership attached to positions, when people are in positions, quote unquote, of leadership. But one of the things that I try to emphasize is that we all have the ability to lead. We all have some leadership within us. And for someone like Viola, she led by example. And she certainly was lifting as she was leading.
I want to raise up for us, and so this, I think I'll connect it with learning in a broader way. So we've got the $10 bill for Viola. We've got the Institute in Cape Breton at the university. I was talking to Wanda recently, and she said there's 4 schools that she knows of that are named for Viola. We've got here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the Ferry. So if I could get a comment, and Dr. Késa, I'm going to start with you on this one, but if I could get a comment about kind of the importance of that, and that maybe a connection about naming and what naming of places and things like that, what that might mean to strengthening in terms of the community, in addressing kind of the issues that we've talked about in terms of identity. Just maybe some general comments on that. And I'll start with you, and we'll just go down the panel table.
So those symbols matter. They're very important. For me, I believe they're important because they raise a consciousness of the lived experiences, then Viola Desmond's lived experiences, her lived realities, and connect to the lived realities today, particularly regarding racism, anti-Black racism, etc. So every time, I hope that folks who are watching, that every time you see that $10 bill, every time you ride on that ferry, every time you see something named after Viola, you will reflect on the fact that not only did racism exist in Viola's day, racism still exists. Various forms of racism. The kind that she endured was anti-Black racism. It came directly connected to enslavement. Slavery did happen in Canada, yes it did. So you dig deep into that history and understanding, but don't stop there. Action. Viola Desmond was a woman of action. Link your understanding, as Mr. Paris said so eloquently earlier, to action. Understanding and action go hand in hand. And secondly, I want to say that representation matters. Every time you see those symbols, you understand that inclusion is still a vision we're striving for. It is not a reality. We need to make sure that all people of color, people of African descent, African Nova Scotians, African Canadians are present and fully included, not just sitting at the table, but actually able to actively contribute our skills, our talents, towards decision-making, leadership, etc., in every single aspect of society, from the top all the way to the bottom, all the way through and around. That is important. And the reason we need to see these symbols of people like Viola Desmond and representation is because of who Viola Desmond represents, who she was as a person. There are statues that are being torn down and they need to be torn down. There are streets that are being renamed and they need to be renamed. However, we need to consider the fact that Viola Desmond's name represents equity. It represents social justice. It represents standing up for human rights and what is right. It represents integrity and community and so many other beautiful things that we want people in society to emulate, and we should want our children to emulate.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that journey of connections. And I feel like I feel inspired. I feel like there's a call to action, but I'm not going to take up the airspace. So other folks on the panel, any comments?
I will just briefly say that Viola continues to give me the kind of courage I need to rehabilitate our history. And as somebody who writes about history, I'm constantly amazed at the voices that are lost and marginalized. And so I look at the past for that inspiration about changing the present. And I do think that Viola has been disruptive in terms of that taken for granted understanding of our history. So it's stories like hers that I feel like I need to continue to pursue. And so when I see her, it's a symbol of the work that still has to be done and the work that I can hopefully make a contribution towards.
Thank you.
This is good, but I think everyone that's at this table, I would hope that, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'd like to think that everybody knows we've got a ways to go. We've got a ways to go in the province of Nova Scotia. It's events and series such as this will help us get there, and I would caution all of us, even when we think we're there, we're going to look and there's still a road ahead. So, and it sometimes I often hear when I hear individuals, non-black in particular, talk about racism and say, well, when they look at me, they don't see color, and how annoying I find that to be. And that there's nothing wrong with you looking at me and saying or seeing a black man. I am a black male, and I'm proud of that. And so the comments that race doesn't matter or the color of your skin doesn't matter, well, it does matter. And what Viola Desmond has done is shed more light on the problems of today, the problems of the past, and she's had a look into the future.
Thank you.
I don't think we have come as far as we would like to. However, I still have a lot of hope. And my hope really, when I think about the impact, the legacy of Viola, and what I see happening in schools in terms of teaching about her and teaching about her impact, that's what I think we're going to see the difference. So the story, one of the most compelling stories I've heard is the story of the high school student in Toronto, who, when he learned of Viola Desmond's story, he wrote to the Premier of Nova Scotia and basically said, that she had to pay a fine and that money should be repaid. That kind of advocacy, and the Premier agreed, and they paid the money to Wanda Robson, her sister. I mean, that story is what gives me incredible, critical hope for the future. Because if you have young people who are reading her story, hearing about her story, and picking up the torch and saying, well, there's something I want to do as well, that's what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to help make Canada the country we all can be proud of. We're not there yet, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
So, Your Honor, it's appropriate that you're going to close out the conversation in terms of the panel, because you were at the beginning of this journey. So, please.
Well, everything the panelists said is just so powerful, and it's very honest and it's so true. It's so true, and it will. I'm hoping that people who are watching this will understand everything that was being said and agree with everything that's being said. And what we were just chatting about now about Viola, my hope is that whenever people hear Viola's name, or if they're on the ferry or to see a $10 bill, number one, people who will see the $10 bill maybe internationally, that they will be curious to know who is this woman, and they will be curious. Who's this black woman on here, you know? Because don't forget, she's the first woman other than Queen Elizabeth II to be on the $10 bill. But I see Viola as, and I want everybody to see her as a person of inspiration, and inspiration for doing the right thing, an inspiration for education, an inspiration for understanding the effects of slavery and colonization that has led to systemic discrimination, the understanding of the negative effect of racism on black people or people of color. But here in Nova Scotia, we are talking about African Nova Scotians who have been experiencing racism even before Viola, and then today, 2021, and about some decisions that are made by government or by private industry that sets us backwards. And that's a big fight, right? Because we don't want to go backwards to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And when I talk about that, I going backward, let's think about Affleckville, what happened in Affleckville, okay? And so when you look at that and then when you go backwards again, you think about Viola, well, get the encouragement from Viola of her movement forward. So it's Viola, when you read about her and study her, you should be inspired by her, even if it means that you want to add to the economic development, further development of our province or our country, because I really do believe if it wasn't for her experience with racism, she would have added to the economic development of this province and our country. I really do believe that she would have. There's no question in my mind. So that's my, and she encourages me too, even though I'm older, but I'm still encouraged by her as well. So, anyway.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you. Thank you for creating this collective space of passion. I'm sure it's being messaged out into the ether as folks will be enjoying this this video programming. I want to say as we close that I hope folks have been able to think about where they might see themselves as an active learner from the Viola Desmond story. And I want to acknowledge the importance of in the naming. It's called, the series was the Viola Desmond Community Talks, because community voice is important. And so thank you to everyone again. Thank you for taking the time to view this program.